What's going on, casters? Dylan from Pandito Gaming, and I'm here having just made my first major mistake as a content creator. I did not have my mic turned on, recording this video originally, and talked for 20 minutes to nobody. Now, on the bright side, that means this video is already well rehearsed and practiced. I originally had set out to make this to bring you guys along with me while I dig in and do some of my research so you can see the kinds of things that I see and the way I think about stuff as I go through it. Now, obviously, I've already done that, so this won't be a live digging in with me directly because I'm an idiot and did not pay attention to my mic while recording, and I'm looking at it now to make sure that it's actually registering. But yeah, so goal today is to go through the collect registry of stellars so that we can see what some baselines of sets are so that we can tell how much a set is registered versus how much it's opened, how much product is out there. I think there's some really interesting baselines that I came up with just thinking randomly, and I think digging into that will give us some good insight into other sets. Well, I know it does now because I've already recorded this once, but that's okay. It's not a big deal. So let's go ahead and jump in. We can start very simply with the Kickstarter promos. So for those of you who don't know, during Kickstarter, there were different levels that you could back at. And if you backed at those levels, you would get a guaranteed serialized card. So there were X of 99s, X of 25s, X of 10s. And if you look at Awakened, you can see the registry rate of these is not good. Obviously, the X of 10s and the X of 25s are okay. Only 16 and 17 of the X of 99s have been registered. That's not particularly good. That's a pretty low rate. Now, we know for a fact that all of these should have been fulfilled by now. Elestrals made a post saying that these should have all been sent out. As of right now, I'm recording this in the middle of August, and only not even 20% of these have been registered. Now, obviously, there's a caveat of maybe people are planning to and they just haven't gotten around to it. Maybe this video, people will watch it and more people will be registered, and a week from now I can come back and see, oh, well, there's actually 40% of them registered. But I think it's very clear to see when we know 100% of the population is out there, not everybody registers their stellars. And the argument of, well, maybe it'll just happen over time, right? Maybe it'll eventually come up. I can immediately negate that by showing you the Awakened Kickstarter, where we don't even have 40% of the knobbies and only 6 out of 10 of the A drives have been registered. And one of the interesting things of that is that 3 of those that were registered of the 6 of 10 were registered by A drive himself, which is half of all the ones that were registered. And I'm pretty sure if you looked at the X out of 10s on the other ones, it's probably names you know as well. So it's just very interesting that when we know 100% of the population is out there, not even half of the people are registering them. So when we see numbers on some of these sets where we see 60% of the stellars have been registered, how do we know that not all of them have been pulled? How do we know that 60% is actually 90%? It's really hard to tell, right? There's no guaranteed way to know. Even if we know consistently, it's usually about half of people or 70% of people or 80% of people will register their stuff. But I think this is just a good opportunity for us to dive in with some baseline numbers that we see to just kind of speculate on how much we think these pull rate numbers actually mean when it comes to stellar registries. And how much of these sets are actually still out there. Now, it might sound weird, but I actually think the best set to start with, which I know now, having already done this once, that I think it actually is really interesting, is one that you probably wouldn't expect, and that's Frostfall. Why I think Frostfall is a good baseline set is because we know for a fact that 15,000 roughly boxes are still in Elestrals inventory. They haven't been sold yet. So we know only 40% of the product is out there. And because this set has been so significantly devalued, I'm fairly confident that the vast majority of people who bought Frostfall boxes have opened them. There is not a lot of collector value in these boxes when you know for a fact you could just buy another one of these boxes at $65. I don't think there are people sitting on cases of this for any reason. These boxes aren't going up anytime soon, so I think most people who have them have probably opened them. I would probably guesstimate that of the boxes that are out there, probably 80 to 90% have already been opened. So knowing that that's a baseline, we should expect roughly 30 to 40% of all the stellars to have been registered if everyone was registering them. And looking at these, they're not, right? We do have 30 of the Chivalrors, 27 of the Morfrost Terrors, 30 of the Lockagons. The rest of them are not even close to that 30 mark. Some of them you can even see are in the 21, 16, 17 range. That's very low. And a pattern that I picked up here is that the more popular Elestrals seem to have a higher registry rate than the less popular ones. Chivalror, Morfrost, Locagon, those all have a higher registry rate than the other ones, where Enfrostics, Panzer, Giraflora, not necessarily bad Elestrals, but ones that people aren't clamoring over, ones that are worth less monetary value, are not being registered at a high enough rate compared to the others. Now, you could argue, hey, it's variance, man. Frostfall has crazy boxes where you can get two Elestrals in this, or two Stellars in the same box. It could be that Lockagons are always paired with Chivalrors or Findusts, and so those just happen to be being pulled more. And that could be a very valid argument. It's just we don't have that data. So I'm going to assume that that's not true, and maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe it's just that Giraflora and Panzers, we just haven't run into those yet. My guess, though, because it sounds pretty logical, is just people are more excited to register the Elestrals that they're big fans of, and you just see less registrations for the less exciting cards. That's one of the takeaways I'm taking from this research, because it's not just in Frostfall. We can see it in some of the other sets as well, that the rate of registration just seems lower for Elestrals that people are less excited for, or that the cards have less value in. So looking through these and knowing like, hey, we expect somewhere between 30 and 40% of these are being registered, because that's how many boxes are out there. And we think most of the boxes have probably been opened, 80 to 90% of them. I think looking at these numbers, knowing that the average here is somewhere around like 25-ish, maybe 26, I would say we're probably looking at a 20 to 40% rate of not registering stellars. Again, this is definitely not an exact science. This is a lot of speculation and assumptions in here, but I feel pretty confident in saying at least 20% of the stellars probably haven't been registered that were found. Just based off the numbers that we know 60% of the boxes are still in storage somewhere. They could not have been opened. We know most of the boxes probably have been opened because there's no value in holding the boxes sealed. So because of that, I would probably say 20 to 30% of these stellars have probably been found and just haven't been logged. Now, again, with variants, I mean, you can see the Kryscorch, none of them have been found. That's obviously interesting because it's possible that batching has affected that. Batching is always a potential issue where maybe multiple copies of the same stellar just ended up in the same cases right next to each other, and they just happen to get pulled first. So that's why I don't think it's guaranteed that the less popular Elestrals are definitely lower just because of these numbers. But like I said, we'll look at other sets, and I think it's a pretty common trend. One of the other interesting things in here is the rate of cryolinks that were registered. I can tell you from experience, people who buy Kryscorch decks open them. If you are sitting on Kryscorch decks and you haven't opened them, what are you doing? I will buy them from you if you don't want to open them. I'm very surprised that this is only at 50%. I was really coming in here expecting this to be the highest registered stellar of all X out of 99s. I was expecting to see a 70, 80 out of 99. It's possible that a lot of people just haven't registered it yet, but it's really interesting to see this only at 50, considering how much Kryscorch decks were just ripped because of their hit rate. The Snow Waddle only being at 44, I think is more reasonable. There's still some of those decks sitting out there, but Kryscorch decks, like I can't find where you can buy one of these. If you know, hit me up. I would love to buy more because they're just so entertaining to open. So, using this as a baseline, we've kind of set a couple hypotheses. First, that I think somewhere between 20 and 40% of stellars are not being registered as they're pulled. Now, there's definitely potential for outliers in there, but I think that's my initial hypothesis that I'm putting here. Another thing is that I think less popular Elestrals, less valuable cards are being registered at a slower rate than ones that are popular. Um, I think something good to jump into first is the first set Kickstarter. Um, you can definitely see the most popular and most valuable X out of 99 is the most registered of all of these, and it's not by a small amount. Equilinks has 55 out of 99 registered, and some of the less popular, less playable ones like Aphoros and Mouse Station are closer towards the bottom of the list. Now, I think these are everything except Equilinks and Aphoros are within a standard deviation. They're not super far off. So I don't think there's a ton meaningful in here, but also Kickstarter was just so popular. I'm not surprised that this has a higher rate. Now, I do think these numbers are artificially deflated. And the biggest reason for that is because, in my opinion, it's because Kickstarter was released before the registry system was. There was no way to register Stellars when it first came out. And I think there were probably a lot of Stellars that were open in those first few weeks of Kickstarter that just never got registered. So I think these numbers are very deflated compared to what they should be. This is just pure speculation, just to be clear. I don't have clear numbers to back this up, but I actually think, the average here is somewhere around like 44 ish. I would think closer to 70%, like 60 to 70% of Kickstarter has probably been opened, in my personal opinion. Again, this is just based on what I think and what I've seen. I think these numbers are much lower because the registry didn't exist, because there were a lot of people who just tried it out for just fun because A Drive was doing it and never really got into Elestrals. I think a lot of those stellars got lost to time and just will never be found. And I think a lot of them just never got registered and are probably still floating around there somewhere, and we just don't know about them. Um, Obviously, only half of the Panteras have been found. I do think anyone who found this probably registered it because it was so valuable, or they sold it off to somebody who would register it. But again, there could definitely be one sitting out there that just hasn't been pulled, and variance obviously matters. The starter decks only having roughly 45% of these being pulled is really interesting. I think Sprouter is up here because PTA was so valuable when it first came out that opening this deck was relatively close to free. So I think this does make sense that this is the most registered of all of them, but I definitely think more than 40 Necrofs are out there. I've seen too many of them out there that are unregistered to think that this is anything less than actually 50. But yeah, and moving on into the base set of first edition, you can see, oh, I didn't actually pull that one up. Sorry, let me reopen that one. So pulling up base set first edition, you can see that this doesn't even compare to the Kickstarter. This set just has a significantly lower registration rate. It has fewer stellars and a lower registration rate. So, nothing is more than 37 versus 55 on Echolinks on the Kickstarter. And these are sitting closer to the like 32 average. It's just a lot less. It's less popular. It's less opened. Supposedly, there might have been more printed of it. I do think it's very interesting that 8 of the Voltempests were already found. I think this speaks a lot to the Kryscorch batching theory. I think if only 40%, based off of our guesses here, of Kickstarter has actually been opened, how did we find 8 of the Voltempests? Variance says that that's possible, just extremely unlikely. It's definitely possible, but I do think batching was probably a thing with the X out of 10s in base set as well. I mean, we feel pretty good that it's a thing in Frostfall. I don't know why it wouldn't have been a thing in base set because they were printed so close together. But yeah, I would say we're probably looking at like low 40s, maybe up to 50% of these have probably been open just based off of this. And the starter decks are actually pretty close to Kickstarter. I do think these are a big draw. The high level Ascensions are really big pulls, especially the Pantera. I personally like the lower Ascensions personally, but everybody has their own opinions. Now I'll actually get into Shattered Stars. Shattered Stars is easily the most consistently open set that Elestrals has. It has a significantly lower print run. The pulls are more spectacular, in my opinion. It is a specialty set. It is intended to be opened. And you can see that by the numbers, right? Everything in Shattered Stars 1 is sitting around that high 50s, 60s mark. I think the biggest exception is Frost. How much of this was due to the error watt? How much of it is due to just people choosing not to register things because the more Frost just isn't as exciting as some of the other ones? I'm not sure. But you can definitely see outside of Frost, the vast majority of these packs have definitely been opened. You can see these numbers are very high, especially in Celebration. You're seeing close to 70% of things have been registered. Does that mean for Celebration that close to 90% of all packs have been opened? I think so, personally. I honestly think when you're talking about Shattered Stars 1, I would be shocked if less than 75 or 80% of all Shattered Stars packs from Chapter 1 have been opened. I'm very confident in thinking that these have just been opened a lot more. So I think the 20 to 40% theory probably works well in here as well. But again, you can see that pattern of Moss Station, Comagma, the Morfrost Indus. Those are just registered a lot less than some of these other cards like Dratagua, Dratara, the Wasp Ivy, and the Flamemoth. Those are just more popular Elestrals that just more people have been interested in. And I know the Flamemoth has kind of dropped a lot in price recently, but when it first came out, it was one of the highest valued serialized stellars for several months. But yeah, I think this kind of supports our theories some more. Now, going into Shattered Stars 2, what's really interesting is that most sets that have sold out on Shop Elestrals are matching those numbers. Now, some of these just recently sold out, so we expect some things to trickle in more. I can tell you, for example, that I have a couple Ivories and Enfrostics that haven't been registered yet. For those of you who missed my video where I talked about it, unless I plan on keeping the Stellar, I tend to not register it just because I want other people to have the satisfaction of being the first owners for it if I'm planning on selling it. So some of these numbers I know for a fact are low. But you can see, like, for Artemis, already almost 60% of these have been registered. For Poseidon and Hephaestus, these two sets have not sold out yet, and they're already over 40, pushing 50%. These are just very popular. The Stellar Divines are things that people really like, and these are getting registered very consistently. You can see the sets that sell the worst, specifically Gemini and Taurus. Those are at some of the least registration rates. The lists are also starting to drop in price as they've either fallen out of the meta, been banned, or just haven't been as popular anymore. I still think these cards have a lot of room to run. I think these will be a popular set at some point, but these just haven't been registered as much. I can tell you the Lavalith, I've actually pulled like 8 of these that aren't registered yet, so this number is actually closer to like 55 or so. Necrolith, I think, is a little low, but Necrolith, Coastalith, and Aviolith, their 3 sets also still haven't sold out. So there's still room for those to grow as well. And meanwhile, the most interesting point here is that Verdolith has the most registries of all X out of 99s. A huge factor of that is that A-Drive owns like 17 of them. So some of these cards are going to have weird variances on how many of them are registered, simply because one of the people who is, is highly active in the community might have pulled a ton of these. Either it's me and I just didn't register a whole bunch of them, or it's A-Drive and he did register a whole bunch of them. That could really mix up some of the numbers. But I think based off of all of this information, the sets that are sold out, the Arcolith is at 56, the Verdolith is at 69, the Lavalith should be closer to like 54, 55 if I registered my stuff. The Artemis is at 58. The Enfrosis is 49. Ivory's at 40. I think very similar to Shattered Stars 1. We're looking at 65 to 70% plus of these sets have already been opened. If we apply our 20 to 40% haven't been registered rule. I think that's really interesting. That has a lot of impact, in my opinion, when looking at these sets. I've said it before. I don't think people who buy Shattered Stars just hold on to them forever. And I think this data really backs that up. I think the majority of packs that are bought end up getting ripped when it comes to Shattered Stars. So moving on, there's three more sets that I want to look at. The first of which is Moonrise. So Moonrise was the only first edition set that did not have some kind of significant mass printing, was not a copy of Kickstarter. It's probably the only normal first edition set that we know of. So I want to look at it to get kind of a baseline of what does it look like. Now, we do know that there's still several thousand boxes of Moonrise sitting on Shop Elestrals. What percentage of boxes is that? We don't really know. There are still lots of these boxes sitting in stores, at LGSs, on eBay, on TCG Player. So it's also hard to know just like how much has been bought versus not. But something that I will again call attention to is that these lesser popular Elestrals like Cryptaris, Gloombat, Starbit, they have less registries than some of the more popular ones like Ardbud. It's just interesting, not consistently, not everywhere, but it is noticeable enough that some of these just feel like they should have been pulled more. But these numbers are pretty deflated, right? The highest one, I believe, going through this is 33 for Bellaby. The other ones are all sitting very low in the 20s. The average of these is somewhere around like 25. And that's not a lot, right? If only a quarter of them have been found so far, we're not looking at 8,000 boxes sitting on Shop Elestrals. Do I think that this is probably closer to like 40% of the boxes have been opened? More than likely. I think we're probably looking somewhere around that. A lot of these serialized stellars are not worth a ton. They didn't hold a lot of value. The Starbits, the Cryptaris, the Gloombat, the Carry On and the Carry Off, they don't sell for $200 or $300 like a lot of other ones do. These often go on sale for 15 or for 150 or even less sometimes. Again, I don't agree with people selling them at that price, but that's what people are often willing to sell them at. Again, variance and batching is also potentially a thing in here. Maybe we're extremely high or extremely low, but I would probably say less than half of Moonrise has been opened at this point based off of these numbers. It's possible that more has been opened. I mean, you do see more of the X out of 10s have been opened, but again, that's a higher variance comparison there. I don't know that I'm willing to stake a claim on that in any way. But I will say that their starter decks are actually keeping up with all of the other ones. It is in the 50%, which is online with a lot of the other starter decks. So even if the booster boxes aren't necessarily being opened as much, the starter decks definitely are. Now, I think the most interesting part of this investigation is now going into the top two sets so far within Divine Champions. I'm on record saying I think Divine Champions has substantially changed the game for Elestrals. I think the market is taking a very long time to turn around and recognize that. And I think these numbers that I'm about to show you back that up really well. Keep in mind all the things we've seen so far, right? Now, looking at Firestorm, which was the first set from the Divine Champions block, you'll immediately notice that a lot of these numbers for registered cards is the highest of all of the mainline sets. The only one that really competes with it is that Kickstarter base set, where this one has a maximum count of 53 registered, but a lot of these are sitting in the low 40s. The average number of pulls for these cards is sitting around 42. So 42% of sellers have been actively registered from Firestorm already. And that is a very impressive number, especially considering how much of this set was pushed to starter decks. And there are still places with starter decks in stock. With the increase in number of packs within the starter deck, moving to the two starter deck boxes, I think you saw, a bigger print run for Firestorm outside of the booster box than we've seen in any other set. But the fact that the opening rate, that the stellar registry rate is so much higher for Firestorm than all of the other mainline sets. Again, Moonrise was sitting close to the 20s and 30s for everything. And there are maybe two, there's only two of the stellars in Firestorm that are under 40. This one, I think Spine Nymph is also. Maybe both of these are starter deck exclusives. I know Sluggle is. I'm not sure about Spine Nymph. I think it is. People can correct me in the comments. I know Earth Scout is as well. But yeah, a lot of these stellars are sitting over 40%. So the implication from that, based on our previous examinations, is that we're probably looking at a 60% rate for opening for Firestorm already a year into its existence. If that's true, that's crazy. 60% of the whole set of all the print run has already been opened. And the fact that we're just now starting to sell out of Shop Elestrals, it's starting to disappear in distribution. Most of the stores that had it posted at $60, $70 are already gone. You can't find it for less than $80 anymore. I think that is extremely encouraging for this set. I think that this set will be close to running out of stock and start to actually push up in price because of this. This is very telling to me. It really supports a lot of my theories. Now, of course, could be confirmation bias. Totally understand that. But I'd love to hear from other people. Do you think anything other than, hey, this is great for Firestorm, it being the highest registered set, mainline set in Elestral's history outside of Kickstarter? And even then, it might even beat that if you crunch the numbers fully. It's just very interesting, and the last set, of course, that we want to look at is Sunstrike, which, going through these numbers, as surprising as it is, I think might even be more exciting to me, especially the amount of Sunstrike that's been sold or given out at different conferences, different events. I think because the rate of not registering things in that situation is probably higher, I think these numbers might even be more deflated than they should be. But yeah, going through this, and of course, we're going to ignore the starter deck exclusives in Volcaries and Quackle and Nimbug. And of course, Eddie and Phosphocell are doubled because they have 198 copies, but you're still looking at 25, 24, 21, 23, 28, 26, 34. Like, the fact that these numbers are already pushing an average in the upper 20s, 27, 28, is a really big deal. This set has only been out for 3 months, guys. The actual rate of opening of this is probably already, based on our numbers, pushing 40, 45%. It's almost halfway gone, and we're only 2.5, 3 months into the life cycle of Sunstrike. That's crazy. Like, that is completely unheard of. Like, obviously Kickstarter probably had something similar to that after the Stellar Registry was first created, but like, this rate of registry of Stellars is the highest we've seen outside of maybe Kickstarter. And I think this has really good implications towards the health of this as a product in general. This is starting to run out of most of the distributors. It is already out on Shop Elestrals. There are very few places that you can pick this up, and I haven't found any listings for this under $80 in over a week. And I don't see a way that this is going to be pushed down anytime soon. The fact that people love to open this is one of the most popular products that has come out. I think the only real black mark, the thing that frustrates people the most, is the duplicated Stellars, the lack of the Dougie. I think had this been executed on correctly, this would be even more popular, and even more packs would have been opened. So overall, I think that this is very good news for Firestorm, for Sunstrike, for Kickstarter, for the Shattered Stars boxes. I think it's just really interesting to go through this kind of research. I just wanted to bring you guys along with some of the things that I do when I'm just looking up things for videos. I thought it would be a fun experience. Unfortunately, I did it a second time because I didn't have my audio on the first time. I apologize for that. But if you guys enjoyed this kind of content where I'm bringing you through my research, let me know. I can build more of these. I can show you guys my process of how I decide what to build videos on and what kinds of things look interesting to me, the data that makes me go and dig into stuff more. But yeah, if you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe to the channel. There's a lot of content like this all the time. That's all I got for you guys. I'm out.